What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. This is our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. Not necessarily current Magic stories, as we are here for another Battle for Zendikar / Oath of the Gatewatch story. We're still in BFZ at this point. But we are here for story number 4 in the succession of stories, Catching Up by Kelly Diggs. This one being all about Jace, although we get to see Liliana and Gideon in this one as well. For our quick reviews up at the top, Amy, what if you start first this time?
their exes.
That is super old school JaAR, for those of you that have not been around.
So from the beginning of JaAR, I have said that Jace and Liliana were exes.
It's like literally the second episode.
Even though they really only hinted at it, they never actually said it. Well, in this story, they said it.
They actually flat out said it, which is funny because it's, again, prior to the stories that we started with, really.
Right.
So, yeah, they actually flat out had Jace say that Liliana was an ex-lover of a former lover of his.
So, ha! I was right all along.
And,
which they already knew.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I knew it before I knew it.
Yeah, that's right. And so, is that your whole quick review?
The story was good. Read it.
I really agree. I think this story actually tied up a lot of things for me. It helped me to understand things, and we'll talk about it, but it really does help to make Shadows over Innistrad make a little bit more sense. Parts of Battle for Zendikar make some sense. So yeah, this was a very, very good one. And
this was definitely one that kind of helped us out by providing us with some information that we needed for our foundation, and we're missing this whole time.
Yeah, it talked back to there were a lot of flashback-ish moments, and there was a lot of summarization of the past, not just in the little blurb at the beginning, because we've talked about that with the italicized text in the beginning, giving you more context for what this story is going to be about. Super awesome. They should do that forever. But the story itself, with Jace and Liliana talking to each other, referenced a lot of older things. Again, we'll talk briefly about those when we get into the full review. But for that reason, right, it really did talk about so many important topics that were really nice to hear about. So yeah, I agree with Amy for that reason. It's definitely worth going back and reading it. And so with that being said, I don't remember if I think I did it last week, and I'll try to do it this week as well. Check the description down below if you want a link to this story, so that you can go read that story and then come back here, because while this is an older story, so we're going to be doing a bit of summarization, slightly different from how we typically do things. It's not going to be the whole kit and caboodle. We're just going to talk about, summarize a specific point and then talk about it. So if you want the full context in the way that it's supposed to be presented, you should go and read the actual story as opposed to listening to us. And then, of course, when you're done, we would love if you would come back here and join in on the discussion, as we always encourage you all to do. But on to the full review itself. Again, this was about Jace. We get more information, or more Jace and Lavinia to start, where Lavinia is stoic and doing her job. She's all about doing her job. We get a little bit more out of Lavinia in War of the Spark, or at least in the Gathering Storm, with Lavinia actually showing a bit more personality than just, yes, I'm here to do my job. Yes, Jace never does his job. Yes, I rag on him for it, but it's also super annoying because I'm trying to do my damn job.
Well, and that's her personality, right? I mean, she's dedicated.
She is an Azorius, after all.
And her boss is not dedicated. And that's something that I think most people can relate to. So.
It's fair. Are you trying to tell me, Amy, that a boss would not always just lead by example and do as much work as the people that work under that boss?
No. Actually,
depends on the boss, of course.
One of my bosses went into the back and cried while I had to attend to the customer service because she went in the back and cried. So, no.
Yeah, well, again,
The problem wasn't even that bad.
If that's something that you can relate to and you want to regale us with it in the comments, more power to you. But yeah, so with this story, again, it's like a brief example of like Jace is the guild pact and his job kind of sucks. or
at the very least, he hates it. Yeah. I mean, Lavinia doesn't.
No. Yeah. Well, but it was super interesting because he said he hates it because it takes a long time and it is never difficult. That's what he said. He's like, it's time consuming, but never hard for him. And for a super genius mind mage, I guess that makes a bit of sense that like if you would get
it's a
bored,
menial job.
yeah, and if you get bored very easily, like, it just makes sense. That's funny to me. I find that funny. I've never been in any type of a situation like that before. I have. Just like having jobs where like you're like, wow.
I actually never have.
You're like, wow, I could do this job with my damn eyes closed. Is there any chance that I could like do anything more fulfilling? Is that possible?
None of my jobs were ever fulfilling, but there was always a level of difficulty to them, despite what they were.
That's fair.
So, I mean, that difficulty could just be the frustration of it taking so long as well. So, I guess that kind of makes sense.
I should have known, right, when Jace is done with Liliana. Wow, we're getting there. When Jace is done with Lavinia, it's not confusing at all. He goes back to his sanctum, which is hidden. And shout outs to Kelly Diggs for the first of many, like, Easter egg hunts that he gives us with this story where we go into Jace's sanctum and we get, there's an illusory hedron, there's an Onaki horn, there's like so many different things. Also, shout outs to the fact that there is half-eaten food everywhere, as well as half-finished projects everywhere. Again, totally not relatable in any way.
Yeah, that sounds like every bachelor ever.
But so I really appreciated that level of detail. And again, those like hints at what's to come in this story, as well as in future stories as well. It was really, really cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, Liliana playing with the horn, like, perfect, right?
Yeah.
Jay saying, oh, cozy up to that Gideon guy,
You could make an ally out of him.
Right. Like, too blatant to be foreshadowing.
It was so good. Because, again, back then we didn't necessarily know. I mean, I guess that's not fair. Because we knew after Magic Origins that it was going to be the story of these 5 planeswalkers. So, I guess, theoretically, we knew that at some point, Gideon and Liliana, combined with Jace and Chandra and Nissa, would all be coming together in some capacity. We didn't specifically know about the Gatewatch yet, but still, yes, it was foreshadowing, and yet, because of the announcement of, like, this is our story arc going forward, we kind of knew that that was going to be the case, but how we got there was pretty interesting, so I appreciate that. Then, as we mentioned, Liliana shows up. Completely unannounced, completely surprisingly, or completely, out of the blue. And now we have the banter back and forth for a good long period of time, which is great. One of the things that I wrote here on my notes, though, is, it said 3 separate times in this story, and it was repeated on purpose, he knew better. That's the line that Jace kind of his...
I mean, they said it like 5 times.
I thought it was 3.
No.
But based on Jace's internal monologue / the narrator, right, talking to us, he knew better was referring to, like, any of his interactions with Liliana, basically. Like, he knew better than to trust her. He knew better than to go out for a walk with her and take her to dinner. He knew better than to focus more on her at the end than the Eldrazi problem. He knew better. And we hear that so many times.
And he knew better than to allow her to not ask the question, right? I mean, he specifically said, I was going to make her ask. And then he specifically said to her, he asked.
Meaning Gideon.
You didn't.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Because
he knew better than to let her stupid manipulations and her, you know, damsel eyes sway him into giving a shit about her nominal issues.
Well, into making him say, I know this is the problem, I will handle your problem for you. He wanted her to actually step up and be a human, because she is. And he references that. But yes, the fact that she hints at it enough and then stops, because she expects him to step in and do that. Yet Gideon flat out is like, I need your help with the Eldrazi. And so Jace goes to do that, and Liliana gets pissed and storms off. That's at the end.
Yeah,
we'll get there. But
she can't possibly muster up the ability to say that she needs somebody's help.
Right.
Because she's a bitch.
Right. And yet she gets upset with him and says, you know, I came here and I became vulnerable with you or whatever. Like, you know, laid myself out vulnerable in front of you.
No, you didn't.
And right. And
She
Jason's
never does that.
Right. And Jason's point was,
she literally has never done that.
Right. And that was Jason's point. He's like, no, you didn't. Because he asked. You didn't ask. You hinted at it and then never actually went there. You could never bring yourself to actually asking for help. For help with the chain veil, for help with your demons, for help with all of this stuff. And again, with the Easter eggs or the foreshadowing, the next time they see, well, not the next time they see each other, but the next time that they interact to the point where she gets to the helping part, she still doesn't ask. She just joins the Gatewatch, faking that she's going to be helping them because she realizes that doing so will allow her to manipulate them into helping her solve her demon problem. So she still never asks. Even then, in Eldritch Moon. So, again, perfect foreshadowing. That's 5 sets away at this point, from Battle for Zendikar to Eldritch Moon. Amazing.
Yep, she's an abuser. Like, she's not going to change that for Jace.
Well,
like, it's just not going to happen. So,
and that's why I was going to say,
because she's never going to care about him as much as she cares about herself. Never.
And we had gotten a lot more context of this relationship in Ixalan stories. Way later on. I mean, talk about foreshadowing, right? Way later on, we get more context from the Jace-Liliana relationship, and which makes this one less cute. This story less cute. Because, like, reading a story and having a guy who has his ex come and visit out of the blue, knowing better than taking her out to dinner, knowing better than falling back in with all of her nonsense, right? I guess
that could arguably just be a typical ex.
Exactly.
Versus Liliana.
Exactly. And so now, knowing what we know today in 2020, looking back at this, it's not as cute anymore.
No.
Because it's like, he knew better. Like, the first time we hear he knew better is at the end of one paragraph. It's at the end of, there's like that demarcation line showing a passage of time occurs, but without actually, you know, showing you everything in between. So they go from Jace's sanctum to he knew better after Liliana asks him to take her to dinner, to the two of them walking down the street arm in arm. And it's like, Ouch. Yuck.
Yeah, it was really yucky.
Yeah.
And then they had a picture of it,
Yeah.
which was even yuckier. Like, I looked at the picture and I was like, there was like this visceral kind of like, I didn't gag, but it was like, I don't know, it was like lower down.
Your brain
It was like
gagged?
no, it was like a right through here kind of, just a, I don't know what it was.
Okay.
But I saw the picture and I was like, ew. They look, ew. Like, they don't look like they should be standing next to each other. They don't, like, she looks like his prisoner. They just look so different and gross and wrong standing next to each other like that. Walking down the street. Like, it's just, it's not okay.
Yeah. I had actually never seen that art before. It didn't depict a card, at least to my knowledge, and to the fact that there wasn't a name of the card underneath the art. But it was clearly a piece of art. Maybe it was just drawn for this story. If you have information on that, I would love to hear it in the comments, because I'm really unsure.
Even, like,
But
the way that they rendered it, like, how shadowy it was, like, I don't know. It was just, it created a very uneasy feeling. And maybe it was supposed to, because he knows better.
even though he doesn't.
And we certainly do. But yeah, it was definitely an uneasy feeling that you got from seeing that picture.
Yeah. But in general, like, that's why I'm saying a lot of this story was kind of like, just like
Yeah.
a lot of the interactions with the two of them, because you know that it's coming from such a toxic place of manipulation on her side, and then him just giving into it, where, again, I was still able to look at it and go, oh wow, this would have been cute prior to Ixalan.
Yeah.
You know, if you didn't know what you know from Ixalan, this would have been maybe a heartwarming story. Instead,
I don't know that it would have been heartwarming, but
Well,
it would have
you're
been
right,
like a
you're right.
typical, like, my ex is here.
right, she keeps
What
pulling
do
me
we
back
have-
in.
Yeah, this is what we have to do now.
That's fair.
Yeah, your ex is back.
Yeah.
And this is what you have to do now.
Right.
Because your ex is a manipulative, abusive bitch. So.
I will also say, through their discussions with one another, mostly prior to them going out to dinner, but it happens as well while they're at dinner, again, more foreshadowing, more flashbacks, more Easter eggs, all of it. You have discussions about Garruk, the chain veil. When she brings out the chain veil at dinner, Jace hears the whispers, and then he's like, but that's her problem to deal with.
Yeah,
and
right.
he ignores them. So again, we know it's the Onaki spirits. We know that from learning about it later on. But Jace pushes it out of his mind because, you know, it's like, whatever, that's not today's story. that's not for that, right? I probably...
He might have to deal with that another day.
Right. I probably would have been a little bit more concerned, but that's just me, maybe.
Well, I think he... well, that's the thing. I think he was concerned, but he, rightfully so, was concerned about the fact that it was happening, not concerned for her.
Sure.
And I think
Sure.
that's exactly how he needed to be.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think there was a lot of potential for him to be scared for her, and a lot of potential for him to think that he would need to do something about it. And I'm very glad that he didn't.
I would like to point out, since we talked about Garruk, since we talked about the chain veil, I genuinely don't remember if I've said this before. Maybe you do, or maybe you do.
Okay.
But I would pay good amounts of money to have, and maybe I don't have to, maybe I just will get this opportunity at some point in the future, fingers crossed, but I would pay, if anyone who has this type of pull is watching, I would pay for dinner for any of these original writers if they want to come and have dinner with us when COVID is not a thing anymore
Well,
and it's
you
safe
know
to do
better,
so.
Joe.
I do not know better.
And to have dinner with them.
No, I don't. But I would happily treat any of these original writers, or all of these original writers, to dinner so that we could have a discussion of what this story was supposed to culminate in. what War of the Spark would have been if they were still around. What Garruk's story would have been if they were still around. I would pay good money, like a nice restaurant, right? For as many of them that want to come out. That's a genuine offer, by the way. If anybody is watching, you are more than welcome to come to dinner with us. We will happily take you all out and we can just have that discussion, because my God, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, just wanted to throw that out there because they talk about Garruk and they talk about the Chain Veil and and they talk about Nicol Bolas in this story. They talk about Tezzeret, Jason the Eldrazi. Like, it's flashbacks, it's flash forwards, it's all of it because it's such a cohesive story. It's all intertwined and they were laying the foundations here.
All right.
You can see the bricks being laid and the cornerstones and all of it.
And it's stable, unlike the, house that they built upon it.
Right. Not they.
Well, not they.
Exactly.
But the house that got built upon it.
Correct. So...
or at least the upper level of that house.
Yeah.
The first level was pretty good.
Yeah,
it's just that, the upstairs was a little hinky.
It's the opposite of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Right? The Leaning Tower of Pisa, if people are unaware, first of all, yes, it leans, but if you look at the top section of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, they attempted to right it a little bit. So when they were building the Leaning Tower, they were building it leaning, right? And yet the top section, when they put it on, realizing that they messed up and then it was leaning, they tried to correct it just ever so slightly, which is hilarious. Like, you're a little late on that one,
yeah,
buddy.
You done fucked up.
But like I said, it's like a reverse leaning tower where the base is sound. They try to prop it up correctly, and then everything else just kind of slightly moves off in this opposite direction.
Kind of like my spine.
Oh no, mine's messed up at the bottom, and then supposedly is fine at the top.
No, mine kind of goes like that, and then rights itself a little bit at the top.
Yeah, mine curves and twists at the bottom, which is always fun. Good times all around. Anyway, enough about chiropractic issues. Then we get to Gideon, which I was a little confused about timeline stuff. Sometimes that happens. Let's talk about it. At the end of the last episode, Gideon collapses outside of Jace's sanctum. Right? We remember this. Okay. Gideon shows up on Ravnica, beaten, bloodied, etc. from Seagate, and from having not slept for 4 or 5 days, collapses on the steps of Jace's sanctum. So now to me, when we mentioned it, it was like, okay, Jace is going to come out at some point and see this, or someone's going to come into the sanctum and be like, there was this dude outside, I don't know, and that's how Jace would find him. But we don't get any context for how Jace and Liliana leave the sanctum to go out to dinner. We don't get that. Right. That's in that demarcation line where we don't get any of that info. It's just they're in his sanctum. Liliana says, "Take me out to dinner." He knows better, and then the next thing you know, they're walking down the street.
Right.
So presumably, if they went out that front door, as opposed to using that illusory portal that Jace has, which I guess would probably make more sense for him to have just done that, but if they used the front steps, Gideon was obviously not there yet. But then the next thing we know, even though the last we heard was that Gideon collapsed on Jace's steps, now Gideon is walking down the thoroughfare and walking into this restaurant, bloodied, beaten up, dinged up on his armor, and says to the maitre d', right, pushes past the maitre d' and is like, I need to speak to the Guild Pact. A little confusing there for me. I get it. It made sense to end that last story that way. Because based on how Gideon was going, that was what was going to happen regardless. He was going to pass out from exhaustion.
Yeah.
But who knows how long he was out. Because when he talks to Jace about Seagate...
Who knows how many points of exhaustion he really had.
D&D. When Gideon collapses, who knows how long he was out for. because he then, when he sees Jace, he says Seagate fell, you know, an hour ago, a few hours ago. I have no idea. Because, I mean, for anybody that has, you know, fallen asleep without checking the clock and woken up and looked at the clock and been like, how long was I?
Or actually passed out.
Correct. Yeah.
You lose that period of time and, you know, you don't necessarily know how much time passed.
Yeah. So that was a little confusing. We got there though, so let's talk about where we're at then. Gideon shows up, as Amy said, he asks. He says, I need your help with the Eldrazi. This is the situation. We need to go. Seagate has fallen. There's a puzzle for you. And again, it's almost exactly what Liliana was hinting at.
Right,
She was hinting at, she needs help. There's a puzzle for you, Jace, to solve. So I need your help. But she didn't ask. Gideon shows up and he says, I need your help, and there's a puzzle for you to solve, Jace. I need your help. So he comes in with the exact 2 points that Liliana had,
right.
But he gets the leg up because he actually asks for Jace's help. And so that is basically, the last big moment then is Lily gets up angry and storms off.
Yeah.
And you're in that moment, which we've seen.
Because Jace chose Gideon at that point.
Right. Well, he hadn't actually even done it yet. Right. He was just like, well, tell me about it. What's going on?
Yeah, but the fact that he was even listening to Gideon.
Correct.
Made her just decide that, you know, she was too good for it or whatever.
Well, and again, it's further manipulation. You're not paying attention to me, so I'm going to force you to pay attention to me by storming off and making a scene.
Right.
And it will force you to pay attention to me. It may be her last desperate effort of, well, I'm going to leave. If you don't want, I'm just going to leave. And then him go, no, wait, please stay. I'll ignore him, I promise. Just let me. And he doesn't do that. He musters up the courage.
A little bit.
I mean, he followed her, but only because he looked at Gideon and was like, just give me a moment, and like ran off after her. But still, you know, she's like, I laid my soul bare to you and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, but he asked me. You didn't ask me for anything. He asked. So that was the moment of, you know, this story ending with him kind of taking his power back a little bit. But I was saying to Amy, again, foreshadowing. Or really just backstory, right? It now makes so much more sense for episode 2 of JaAR of all time.
Right. All of these aspects of things that were sort of hinted at before that we didn't know for certain were true. Now we know them. You know, now that we went back far enough, we read them, you know, explicitly laid out, you know?
Yeah. And I believe, like I said, I believe it's episode 2. It might be episode 3, but it's called An Unwelcome Guest, or just Unwelcome Guest. But it's Jace.
That.
Yeah, it's Jace showing up to Liliana on Innistrad and trying to talk to her, and it's super confrontational. Whereas here, it's kind of light. Like I said, it's like light banter, and like Jace is getting frustrated here and there, but it's still like a at the base of it, a friendly interaction. Although, ironically, Jace says to Liliana, we've never been friends.
Right.
But it's at least a civil conversation, whereas when Jace finds Liliana on Innistrad, it's very much like I'm going to kill you if you say the wrong thing, so tread carefully or just leave.
Right.
Right? So we get those moments, which is super interesting. But yeah, and then it basically ends with Jace, you know, Liliana leaves. She gives him back the dead rose, or the wilted rose.
Gives him back. Yeah.
Well, because he gave it to her. She wilted
threw it at him.
And put it in her, right. Oh no, yeah, she threw it on the floor.
Yeah.
And walked off, which, by the way, funniest moment of this entire story. Liliana, Jace running after Liliana, saying, excuse me, Gideon, I'll be right back. Leaves, goes after Lily, and talks to her, where she takes the rose out of her hair, throws it on the floor, and storms off. Jace bends down, picks up the rose, looks at it, and hears Gideon come up behind him. Gideon comes up behind him and goes, finished? It's like, yeah,
I was like,
I guess.
He legit was just watching, saw that she threw the rose, and was like, oh, okay. No, it's time.
Oh my god.
Amazing.
So funny.
Amazing.
Because again, there's two ways to look at that. One is Gideon's like, okay, dude, hurry up, snap out of it, let's go.
Right. Like,
or
this is important. Like, put your petty, like, relationship problems aside.
Yeah.
For 5 minutes, because we have, you know, people's lives at stake here.
Yeah. Or he really is just as oblivious as they joke that he is. And
I don't think that's oblivious at all.
What?
I think that's perfectly timed.
Well...
Because if he had waited, that would have given Jace enough time to decide whether he was then going to attempt to continue to follow her.
Sure.
As opposed to helping him.
Sure.
And it was important for him to help Gideon.
Well, and
Gideon knows that.
Right.
So Gideon was going to do what he needed to do to get him to do it. So I think that that was perfect timing. I think that that was calculated from a strategic person's perspective.
Well, and I was going to...
he is that.
Right. And I was going to say, it further proving your point, I guess, is then when Gideon has that moment of looking at Jason saying, do I have your full attention?
Like, stop focusing on the rose. Stop focusing on your ex. This is important.
Right. And so that's when Jace throws the rose down and is like, yes, tell me everything you know about the Eldrazi. And they start walking. Jace being a good enough guy, though, and convincing Gideon, like, why don't you go to a healer so that you don't die before we actually get to, you know, accomplish this task. And that's how it ends. It ends with that moment of the two of them are now together. They're going to work together for the betterment of Zendikar. We will be getting...
And there's even more foreshadowing there because, you know, they talk about, you know, they specifically say, Jace specifically says, we were never friends to Liliana. Mm-hmm. And then that moment is like the moment where Jace and Gideon become friends.
Sure. Well, and also, though, still foreshadowing, Jace... The narrator or Jace's inner monologue mentions that Gideon is so tall when Gideon shows up to the table. And Jace stands up from the table at one point to look at Gideon and says, or the story says, Jace shouldn't have stood up because he still needs to crane his neck to look up into Gideon's eyes.
Yeah.
And it says, Jace always hated feeling small. And again, we have that conflict between Jace and Gideon. And it's not really here yet, but at the same time, it shows like Gideon is a natural born leader. Jace wants to be a leader, but when he's presented with such a strong personality like Gideon, such an imposing figure as Gideon, he feels small.
Yeah, but the reason why he hates feeling small is because he's been made to feel small constantly by his fucking abusive girlfriend. And
by the fact that he has huge holes in his memory because they were wiped out by a sphinx, which he doesn't remember.
Right.
So, yes, I mean, just all of the tragic backstory.
Like you do.
Yeah, yeah. That super relatable thing of when your brain gets wiped by a sphinx. We've all been there, everybody. I get it. But, we still have to talk about it. So, yeah, that's the end of this story. This was jam-packed. Yeah. This one was probably the best.
Full of info.
Probably the best of the four that we've read so far.
And, I mean, it's good because, we say, oh, this is like completing the foundation that was never complete. But realistically, like, everything that was in here was stuff we already knew. Like, none of it was actual fully new information.
Right, it was just maybe more fully fleshed out than the
but this
implications.
This is the story where they actually tell you the stuff.
Yeah.
As opposed to just hinting at it. And we never got this.
Right.
So, because we started reading after this.
Right, not we, the Vorthos community. Right, we, Amy us. And Joe, yeah.
So, we learned all these things the hard way, as opposed to reading this story and getting told all of it and then being able to go forward and just know everything we were supposed to already know.
Well, but you say learning it the hard way. Depending on the situation, I mean, it's always nice to be able to figure things out like that.
Yes.
Right? The authors know this information, and some of the readers know this information, but the sign of a good, like, continuous story like this is where your story, without explicitly doing an information dump over and over again, instead of having to like give full context for long-running stories, you hint at it. You let the readers that may not know figure it out for themselves, and then if they go back and read your previous material, that's when they get that the reward for going back.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, it clicks.
Right, or hint at a couple of different things, and then, you know, they don't get to figure it out till later, you know?
Yeah. It was just super well done. Shout outs to Kelly Diggs. Just super well done story. We really liked this one.
Because, I mean, we talked about information dumps. This was so jam-packed with information, but it wasn't an information dump. It was a
because it was
good,
disguised
cohesive story.
Yes.
It was an actual story.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, you know, a bunch of bullet-pointed facts that they tried to, like, write sentences around.
Right. And I'll say, right, from my perspective, this is what happens when you have vision into the future. Mm-hmm. When you know where your story is going, you can hint at it. And it can be hints that aren't super ham-fisted, that aren't blatantly obvious, and that aren't and yet also they're not just completely disconnected from every other story you're doing.
Right. There's a cohesion. There's there's a through line. It makes sense. It's there's continuity.
Yeah.
And there's an amount of care provided to it. That allows the readers to learn the information as well as get to form relationships with the characters, as opposed to just feeling like they're reading a textbook.
Yeah. Yeah. So, super well done. Loved it. We will be back next week for number 5. Like I said, you know, with this supercharged into being interested in the next one. Excuse me. But yeah, don't forget, right, reading these stories, getting these moments of, I guess, pseudo-nostalgia for remembering the previous stories, for getting better context for other stories that we've read, that you've all read. Maybe this story, you'd read it previously, and this is just a reminder to you of that. And
maybe that's why you were sitting there watching our videos going, what the heck, guys, we knew this already, you know, but we didn't know it.
Right. And so, as always, let us know those things in the comments. But being able to explore these stories, learn more things, have our minds opened to existing things that we had never seen.
Right.
All of that stuff is really important for us, and we hope really fun for all of you as we all join together and show off our
#Vorthos Pride.
Super good. Really liked this one. Looking forward to next week. So we will see you next week for that. Please don't forget, by the way, if you are new to the channel or if you are unaware, Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We just went through daylight savings. Please be aware of that for us, if you did not. But 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do MTG Arena. We stream MTG Arena here on the channel. This past Monday was super fun. We did the like Zendikar festival that they had going on, and then went and did some more Zendikar drafts. Whatever is going on at the time, that's what we're trying to get into limited wise. So that was super fun. And then Fridays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we are streaming video game content. This Friday specifically, as with last Friday, we are continuing Katamari Damacy Reroll.
Yeah.
Super fun. We both love the game. We hope that you'll come out and join us. It's just like a fun, chill time, rolling up some stuff. If you're not familiar with the game, you should definitely check it out. It is wild. It's super fun. So we hope to see you on our streams. We have 6 videos released per week as well this being one of them. So 5 other videos, 3 on this channel, 3 on Video Games for All. You can also check out Gluten Free for All. Subscribe, ring the bells, all that fun YouTube stuff. We would really love to hear from you in the comments. Liking, sharing, it all helps us out immensely. We are, by the way, I haven't talked about this in a very long time. We are so close to 500 subscribers.
Ooh.
So close. We're like less than 10 away. I think we can do it. So if you know people who would be interested in this content, any of the content that we put out, share it with them. Encourage them to subscribe as well. We're so close.
Yes, please.
So,
especially on Video Games for All, because I feel like that has so much more reach than MTG content specifically. You know,
fair.
Not everybody is aware of MTG, but you know, everybody's aware of video games.
Yeah. And
everybody but me. Which is kind of the point.
And that's the point of the channel, yeah. But, and with Video Games for All, we're nowhere near 500, but we will, hopefully we'll get there. That's the idea, right? So yeah, we thank you all for any and all support that you are willing to give. It really does help us out a lot, and we appreciate it. We hope that everybody's continuing to stay safe and happy and healthy. And for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.